Section 1 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Larry Wilson. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. The Stingless Bees of South America, by Reverend L. Johnson. I received a few days ago a copy of Mr. Hawley's circular upon the stingless bee, mentioned in the American Bee Journal of January 5th. As I suppose thousands of these circulars are distributed among the beekeepers of America, many of whom are yet inexperienced, it is well to notice this new advocate for public favor. First, I think the introduction of an entirely new variety of bee at this time, whose merits are yet untried, is exceedingly injudicious. Only last year we received the Cyprian, which is still on trial. We do not yet know their true merits in their purity, much less when crossed with other varieties. We all know the difficulties we have encountered with mixtures in the past. Let us not increase them by introducing to any great extent new families until we thoroughly test our present importations. Think of approaching a hive of bees we thought stingless, yet in which 1/4 or 1/8 are vindictive hybrids, armed with venom-tipped javelins. The very thought settles it. Second, from the testimony of Mr. Wagner and others who years ago investigated the merits of all these new claimants, their honey-gathering qualities are uncertain, and their ability to endure our vigorous winters is exceedingly questionable. In truth, from Mr. Hawley's statements, some of these bees produce a honey which is unfit for use. Third, we consider the stings of our blacks and Italians an actual advantage. The beekeeper who is careful and intelligent in the management of his bees need not be stung, and even if stung in the course of a year or two, he becomes so inoculated with the poison that he is no longer affected by it. These, we know, are prevalent everywhere, and nothing often protects our hives against their depredations except the fear of being stung. Let it but once be generally known that our bees cannot sting, and our honey will be pilfered as constantly as our melons and fruits. A big dog and a shotgun and a faithful guard must then occupy the place of the smoker, bee veil, and gauntlets. As for myself, I think the latter preferable, and decidedly the cheapest. While we all want the best bee the world affords, we should not increase our present difficulties by grasping at the near shadow of these untried rovers of the tangled wilds of Brazil. Walton, Kentucky, January 3, 1881.
Section 2 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This section is read by Susan Akers. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. Lower Ventilation in Winter, by J.M. Shuck. The ventilator in the bottom of the hive, recommended by the lamented Quinby, seems to be misunderstood by some of our beekeepers. See article by William Cam in American Bee Journal of January 5, 1881. This hole in the bottom of the hive was doubtless intended originally to ventilate the hive during the heated term of the honey season, and was afterwards found to be useful in winter. In use, the ventilator should be closed from March 1st until the heat in the hive begins to drive the bees to the outside for air, say when the mercury stands at about 90 degrees to 100 degrees in the shade. Work in the hives thus treated will usually go on without interruption, when hives that are not suitably ventilated are almost wholly idle. On the approach of cool weather, the ventilator should be closed until preparations for winter. About November 1st in this latitude, better October 1st, the hive should be suitably packed for winter, when the ventilator in the bottom may be opened and coarse straw or litter stuffed under the hive to prevent the cold air entering the hive until sufficiently tempered by its passage through the straw. It may not be known upon what theory this ventilation is beneficial in winter, but long-continued use and frequent tests have proven its value, which is of more importance than the mere theory. Some eminent apiarists advocate that the bottom ventilator be open and unprotected during the entire winter. While this latter practice seems extreme, some very fine results have attended it, but nothing equal to the more conservative practice of opening the ventilator for winter and protecting with straw in the way indicated. Strong wire cloth should be used that cannot be cut by rats or mice, and not more than 10 meshes to the inch. Such wire cloth as this, with the care as to the seasons alluded to, will entirely prevent the closing of the ventilator with propolis, and at the same time prove the value of lower ventilation in winter and in summer. Des Moines, Iowa. End of section 2.
Section 3 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Tommie McCoy. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Rocky Mountain Bee Plant, by D.S. Grimes. Some of the descriptions of this plant, Cleome integrifolia, hardly do it justice as a honey producer. It grows to the height of 4 or 5 feet with hard woody fibers like mustard, often measuring more than 1 inch in diameter. The seeds are borne in pods much the size and appearance of the black mustard. It blooms early in the spring and continues in bloom until frost. As the season advances, the spikes of the beautiful flowers continue to grow in length, with seeds and flowers in all stages of growth from the full pods to the new opening bloom. The leaves throw off a very offensive odor when handled. As a honey-producing plant, it is second to no other. In our apiary we have 40 colonies of bees, and although we are located among vegetable and fruit gardens, our bees prefer this plant to all others. It is not troublesome in cultivated grounds, but prefers the roadside or waste places. We value it highly and without doubt is worthy the attention of beekeepers. Denver, Colorado. End of section 3.
Section number 4 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Kristin Barkhurst. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. By Various. My Report for 1880 by D.M. Wright. I have to report the poorest season since 1869 in this section. Last fall, I placed half of my bees in a bee house above ground. They were in good condition when put in and wintered quite well considering the warm weather we had. As I was building a shop with a bee cellar underneath, the rest of our bees were left upon the summer stands until the cellar was ready to receive them, which was much later than I expected, and as they were totally unprepared for wintering out of doors, they suffered considerably from cold snaps in the early winter. When removed to the cellar, quite a number of them showed signs of dysentery. The weather was so warm after placing them in the cellar that I could not keep it at the requisite temperature. Consequently, they were very uneasy. The cellar was also quite damp, which of course did not help matters any, and the result was that I lost quite heavily. As the weather turned out, they would probably have wintered quite as well if they had been left on their summer stands the remainder of the winter. The spring was one of the worst for bees that I have ever experienced. There were but few pleasant days on which bees could fly with safety. Cold, bleak winds and cloudy weather prevailed most of the time, when it was almost sure death to the little workers to venture beyond the entrance of their hives. Instead of increasing as usual in May, they were at a standstill, or even decreasing in numbers. I commenced the season with 165 colonies. Some of them were very small. I received an increase of 63 swarms, mostly natural, and 4,503 pounds of surplus honey, all from buckwheat. 3,325 pounds of the above was comb honey, the balance extracted. This gives about 38% increase and an average of a little over 27 pounds of surplus honey to each colony, against an increase of 65% and an average of 91 pounds, a fraction, 7/8 of which was comb honey, of surplus honey to each colony last season. White and melilot clover yielded no honey this season in this section. Basswood yielded well for 3 or 4 days, and then stopped short, but as the hives contained but little honey at this time, the bees appropriated it for their own use, and they needed it much, as 5 or 6 weeks of scarcity followed this short flow. On August 10th, the bees commenced storing buckwheat honey, and continued moderately for about 4 weeks. I noticed that several correspondents complain of the frequent failure of buckwheat to secrete honey. In this section, it is our main dependence for surplus and has not failed to give us a fair yield for the past 6 years. My bees are all in one location, and there is probably 150 colonies besides, within a radius of 1 mile. I am confident that this locality was overstocked this season, and think that I could have made as good a report from half the number of colonies. Nowheresville, New York. End of Section 4.
Section 5 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Adulteration of Honey with Glucose. L. H. Scudder. Feeling as I do the importance of waging an incessant warfare against the use of the vile stuff in adulterating honey, sugar, and syrups of all kinds, I desire to urge upon all the necessity of agitating the question until we secure the passage of a law by Congress against the adulteration of food of any kind. It will be useless to undertake to secure the passage of a law simply to prevent the adulteration of honey, for we will not be able to secure the necessary pressure to accomplish it. I recently had a conversation with our member of Congress on the subject, and he informed me that a general law prohibiting the adulteration of all articles of food would be more easily obtained, because more would be interested in the passage of such a law if we could cause them to see the importance of it. We as honey producers feel the effects of the adulteration of honey keenly, because it is a death blow to our business unless we can secure protection. Just let me call your attention to a few facts in relation to the matter. First, please notice the fact that now with less than 1/4 of a crop of honey, there is no appreciable advance in the price of extracted honey. Why? Because glucose is cheap and unprincipled men numerous, and so long as enough honey can be obtained to flavor the compound, the market will be supplied with pure honey. Notice the market quotations on extracted honey for the last 3 years, and you will discover no fluctuation worthy of notice, notwithstanding the great difference in the annual products. Our friends have long been wishing for firm prices for honey, and they seem at last to have their wish. 7 to 8 cents seems to be the fixed price at wholesale in Chicago for extracted honey. Let me caution you not to be too confident that even such prices can be obtained in the near future. Just note, if you please, how rapidly the manufacture of glucose is increasing. Factories are being started in all parts of our country. Enough are already in operation to consume 5 million of bushels of corn annually in the West alone. Now when you take into consideration the fact that they obtain over 3 gallons per bushel of what they call glucose or corn syrup, you will see that over 15 million gallons annually are thrown upon our markets to be sold and used in various ways. But mark you, not 1 gallon is sold to the consumer by its proper name. The dear people buy it in their honey, candy, sugar, golden syrup, drips, and in other commodities we know not of. If your druggist sells you poison, the law compels him to label it, that no harm may come of it. Then why not compel these men to do the same? 'Tis true they may not sell a mixture so destructive as arsenic or any of the deadly poisons, but just as certainly injurious as any of them. Now, my friends, in justice to ourselves and humanity, let us continue our warfare until the people, by their representatives in Congress assembled, say to those men that their goods must be properly labeled and sold on their own merits. I fancy when that is done there will be a decline in the sulfuric acid and old rag market. New Boston, Illinois. End of Section 5.
Section 6 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Jonathan Kirk. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. By Various. Section 6. For the American Bee Journal, The Duplication of Queens. D.A. Pike. It is not my intention to stir up the much-vexed question of queens duplicating themselves, but I wish to show to the readers of the American Bee Journal that it was no fault of mine that the test did not come off. I sent the queen to Professor A.J. Cook on the 14th of June, according to contract. I did not hear anything from him direct until September 12th, but I heard from the editor of the journal that Professor Cook had received the queen and he was rearing the queens to make the test. Here is what he says about the queen and her daughters. Lansing, Michigan, September 2nd, 1880. Dear Sir, the queen came all right and was safely introduced. I feel certain that I acknowledged her receipt at the time. She is very beautiful, and her young queens and drones have been greatly admired by many visitors. Her young queens are all beautiful. I am very busy, but will try to send you a queen soon. A.J. Cook. The readers of the Bee Journal will judge for themselves in regard to the queens. For their benefit, let me say that I have had the albino bees since 1873. In my judgment, they have proved to be a superior race of bees. They are better honey gatherers than the Italians and are more gentle to handle. Success to the American Bee Journal. Smithsburg, Maryland. As Professor Cook is quoted in the above, we requested him to report the result of the test for the Bee Journal, and it is as follows. Editor. Mr. Pike's letter gives me the opportunity which I desire to rise and explain. The facts as given by Mr. Pike are wholly correct, though he fails to add that I wrote him that the young queens were not exact copies of the one sent. I wrote the result to him as I thought he was the proper person to give it publicity, inasmuch I understood that the sequel had no importance so far as he and Mr. Moon's contract was concerned, as I supposed that was given up. I repeat here substantially what I wrote to Mr. Pike. The queen was a great beauty, so everyone said, and I showed her to many. Her worker progeny were also well marked, very bright, and beautiful. Her drones were also exceedingly fine, the most highly colored ones I have ever seen. The young queens were also very beautiful, but not one was there which was not easily distinguished from the mother, and that, too, after they had fully developed and were well to laying. The workers were not all just alike, nor were the drones. These conclusions were not mine alone, but were those of my students and many others whose opinions I asked. I may add that the colony did not equal some of my others in rapidity of increase, though it was a good one. I believe this queen and her progeny are what we may expect from long, careful, and faithful selection with color as our chief object. The longer we thus carefully breed, the greater uniformity we will secure. But we can never attain that point where we shall be perfectly certain that the offspring of our bees, or any other of our animals, will perfectly copy the parents or be just alike. It is contrary to nature, and so Mr. Moon is surely correct. The nearest approach to perfect reproduction and uniformity of offspring, which I have met, is shown by the Palestine bees, Holy Land bees. This, of course, is the result of close in- and inbreeding by nature, while from the most severe selection of the fittest by the same relentless hand, no deterioration, but rather the increase in excellence, have been the unvarying result. Yet even here we shall see variation from perfect uniformity. A.J. Cook, Lansing, Michigan, December 13th, 1880. End of Section 6.
Section 7 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Stacey M. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. Loss of Bees in Winter, by Hiram, Roop. We have often hinted in the Bee Journal that 1/2 of all the bees were lost each winter in the northern states. Our assertion was based upon facts gleaned from a wide scope of country each spring as to the condition of bees, how wintered, etc. We are now having another severe winter. What the result will be on the honey-gatherers is easily conjectured. We apprehend that 2/3 of the colonies in Michigan will be lost. Shall we then, after a few ineffectual trials at a more rational method for safe wintering, sit down and allow this sweeping destruction to go on? We can winter safely enough in a good cellar, but alas, the spring. For our part, we would rather have 100 colonies left out of 200 wintered on summer stands than to have 150 left out of the same number wintered in any cellar or depository. Carson City, Michigan. End of Section 7.
Section 8 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Prevention of Swarming, by Greiner Brothers. When we take the above heading for our subject, it is not with the intention to take the position of instructors. We only wish to give our 5 years' experience on this point to show that it requires time and experience to get acquainted with the business and persistent labor to make it profitable. Amongst other difficulties, swarming seems to take the lead in causing disappointments, and to illustrate this, we will relate an incident which came under our observation this season. We had occasion to pass a neighbor who kept some bees in the old-fashioned box hive way of letting bees have their own way very frequently this summer, and the bee question formed a good share of our conversation whenever we met. These few colonies of our friend were nicely to work in boxes. They were filled with comb and honey ready to begin capping about the middle of June. The next time we passed, our neighbor met us with joyful countenance and informed us that his bees had swarmed, considering himself the lucky gainer of so many swarms. On questioning, "Do they work yet in boxes?" he answered, "No, they have not only stopped working, but they have taken all the honey they had in the boxes with them when they swarmed." We learned at the close of the season that our friend had only comb without honey for his share. His bees never went to work in said boxes. Cases of this kind all beekeepers have experienced, and it is a settled matter that swarming must be controlled. The only question is, which is the most profitable way? To ascertain this, we have studied everything that has been written on the subject for the last 3 or 4 years, and have experimented on nearly all the different methods, which older beekeepers have pronounced the best. We would say here that we never had the privilege yet to be with our bees constantly through swarming time, but could visit them only once a week. Of course, we had to adopt plans according to this unfavorable circumstance and could not manage our bees to suit our own ideas. The different ways we have tried to prevent swarming are destroying queen cells, introducing empty comb in brood nests weekly, exchanging strong with weak colonies, dividing colonies, increasing by the shaking off process. See G.M. Doolittle, American Bee Journal, page 355, 1879. Introducing a young queen, giving plenty of empty comb and chaff hive as non-swarmer. In the beginning of our beekeeping career, a beekeeping friend told us that swarming could be very easily controlled by destroying queen cells. We did not know any different at that time and consequently believed it. That season turned out to be a good honey year, and as we had only transferred colonies, which are not very liable to swarm anyhow, under our care, they did not swarm to speak of. The second year proved to be a good honey season also, a good share of our bees being transferred colonies, plenty of surplus room was given, and all queen cells destroyed. They worked nicely in boxes and swarmed very little that year. By that time we believed in destroying queen cells as an infallible means to prevent swarming, and made our plans for the following season accordingly. And what was the result? The season failed to give us any great amount of surplus. Honey came in just fast enough to keep bees breeding nicely, but too little to induce them to work in boxes. Swarming time arrived, and in spite of our destroying queen cells, swarms poured out by the wholesale. Our increased labors in cutting out cells availed us nothing, and the more we worked, the more these swarmed, with or without queen cells. We transferred that season 15 colonies for a beekeeping friend. He, as well as ourselves, felt very anxious that these be kept from swarming, and to accomplish this, we made it a point to examine them once a week, taking particular pains that no cells were overlooked. Everything went well until the latter part of June. The next day, after we had again destroyed all queen cells, a swarm came out. The next day another, the third day still another, and the fourth day 3 more, and by the time we called again, a week later, 8 of the 15 colonies had swarmed. And before the season had passed, we had changed our ideas in regard to prevention of swarms by destroying queen cells. We read that the introduction of an empty comb in the middle of their brood nest would keep a colony a week from swarming, and also that bees with a young queen would not swarm. This we tried the next year. We had lost quite a number of colonies that winter, and consequently had a good many combs at our disposal. These we used as stated, forming a new colony with a young laying queen of every 8 frames of brood, which we took, one from a hive, to make room for the empty comb. Now, did this keep our bees from swarming? No more than did the destruction of the queen cells the year previous. After that, we divided our bees. This, if queen cells are destroyed, will undoubtedly keep them from swarming, but on account of the heavy increase, colonies are weakened too much for working in the boxes. Consequently, the object to produce the most surplus is missed. A better way is to increase by the shaking off process. We commence with those that were making the strongest preparation for swarming, and by close watching and repeating this operation as often as other colonies would show any inclination to swarm, we kept the upper hand of our bees pretty well. But still they swarmed more than we wished and hoped for. We transferred 6 colonies late this spring. In June, and as honey was coming in plentiful at that time, applied our section cases right off. 1 week after we divided, or rather increased these by the shaking off process, giving the 3 sets of comb and a young laying queen. A week later, one of these 3 swarmed. This, of course, did not meet our approval, for we wished to have them continue work in the sections as they had commenced. And for that reason we hived them back, catching the queen and clipping her wings at the time, thinking that this operation would put a final stop to the ill behavior of this unmanageable queen. But no, another week, and out they came again, this time a queenless colony. But the queen was wingless and unable to fly. We picked her out of the grass, and as soon as the swarm returned, put her back in the hive. This was our last attempt, and the colony made us about 30 pounds of comb honey this summer. The whole lot has averaged 70 pounds per colony from the original 6. We have also exchanged weak with strong colonies. This may have a tendency to keep both from swarming, but it is by no means a certainty, and as we do not aim to have weak colonies in swarming time for that purpose, the plan cannot be very well followed up. It has been supposed, and remarks have been made to the effect that a hive with sufficient shaft protection and plenty of empty comb would form a most perfect non-swarmer. To test this, we built a hive with about 4 inches of shaft all around, supplied the necessary comb, and transferred a colony into the same. We did not expect that this colony would do anything but work, at least not until all the combs were filled with brood and honey. But how great was our surprise upon returning home from one of our weekly trips to hear that our non-swarmer had followed suit by also giving a swarm. To sum it all up, our 5 years' experience has brought us to the conclusion that under our present circumstances, the shaking off process is the most desirable way of managing to keep bees in working condition through swarming time. But if we could be with our bees constantly, we would let them swarm the natural way. Of course, we would take the precaution to get our bees as strong as possible by the use of division boards and changing combs, and rear our queens in the forepart of the season to have them laying and ready for use. Then when a swarm issues, we would hive it on the stand of the strongest colony that is the nearest, ready to swarm, and remove this one to a new location. The mother colony, which is then queenless, must be provided with a young queen, and all queen cells of those from which no swarms are desired must be destroyed. The entire apiary should be managed in this way, and by close attention and judicious application of surplus room, an abundant crop of honey may be expected. Naples, New York. End of Section 8, read by Brize Cries, Ohio. Section 9 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. Mating Queens in Confinement. King Kramer. For several years I have read in the American Bee Journal the different methods tried out of mating queens in confinement, and all the experiments that I have read of were made with a box or a barrel with a glass in the end of it. If a queen or a drone flies up and strikes that glass, there will be no more mating that day. There is no better way to kill bees than to let them butt against a glass. Not only that, who can tell just the right time to take out the queen for confinement or mating? I at once saw that could not be practicable and began some experiments, the result of which, together with the modus operandi of arriving at it, I purpose, with your consent, to lay before your readers. I took a frame of brood with as many young bees as I could get and put them in the second story of a Langstroth hive with a strong colony of bees in the lower story in order to get their heat for the occupants of the upper story, as the nights around the 1st of September were getting cold. Now we have a small swarm of bees in the upper story with the honey board between the bees below and those above, and also a honey board over the upper bees. On the second day they were there, I gave them a queen cell. In 2 days it hatched out. I then gave them 10 or 15 young drones. Now I had the queen, drones, and bees all confined in the upper story of the hive. The bees were fed and watered every morning. The fertilizing box is 2 feet high and fits the hive on the top. It has a muslin cloth tacked over the upper end and the lid of the hive over that. When the queen was 3 days old, I made a small hole 3 inches long and 1/2 inch wide in the honey board and took the lid off the cloth. When the young bees and the drones flew around within this box as if they were flying in and out of a hive. Every afternoon the lid was taken off the cloth 2 hours and then replaced. I have 2 queens in my apiary that mated by this process, and they were the only ones that I tried, as it was too late in the season to experiment further. But I can with safety say that by the end of another season, there will be hundreds of queens mated by this process, and fertilizing queens in confinement will be proclaimed a success. Dent, Ohio. End of section 9, read by Brize Cries, Ohio.
Section 10 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by MamaPhish. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. By various. Bees in Minnesota. I am well pleased that the journal is to come every week in place of once a month. Last spring I had 12 colonies, which were wintered in a dry cellar without losing any. Sold 1, increased to 22. Obtained about 350 pounds of comb honey and plenty of honey for wintering. I bought 20 colonies of blacks in box hives last fall for $60, making 42. Then I heard of different persons who were going to kill their bees for the honey. I obtained permission to drive the bees out and thus obtained 16 colonies more, all blacks. In December, I bought all of Mr. Nelson Perkins' apiary, there being 30 colonies of Italians and hybrids, 30 empty hives, 250 combs in frames, extractor and boxes, making in all 88 colonies. I have lost 2 queens up to date. They are wintering well to all appearance. It has been down to 40 degrees below zero here this winter. The farmers here are going to sow considerable Alsike clover in the spring. I intend to encourage it all I can. I will sow all the sweet clover I can in waste places. How close can I put my hives together in the spring and have them do well? Will it do to feed amber cane syrup to stimulate breeding in the spring? W.M. Lossing. Hoka, Minnesota, January 13, 1881. 4 to 6 feet between hives at the sides and 8 to 10 feet between at front and rear which will give ample room to manipulate one row without interfering with the next. We think a good article of amber cane syrup would be used to advantage for spring feeding. When the bees can pass in and out of the hives with perfect freedom, many kinds of feed may be sparingly given, which would prove disastrous if given in large quantities to winter on. E.D. Bees had a fly. My bees are in fine condition, on summer stands under a shed 8 feet wide and 50 feet long. Yesterday was warm enough for them to take a fly, but today is very cold. I have not heard of any material loss of bees in this section this winter. I have received 2 copies of the Weekly Bee Journal, and to say that I am pleased with it would not fully express my appreciation. I always expect to work for its interest and for the noble work in which it is engaged. I wish it a rich harvest this year. W. W. Lynch, Maysville, Kentucky, January 14, 1881. End of section 10.
Section 11 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Brian Gallegos. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Our mailbox, result of last season, sections. Result of last season. With 56 colonies last spring, poor as the season was, I obtained a nice lot of honey. I purchased an extractor last spring, and the result was really surprising. From 9 colonies, I obtained 93 gallons, or over 1,000 pounds, of as nice honey as ever graced a table or tickled the palate of an epicure. Of comb honey, I cannot say to a certainty how much I obtained. I experimented with one colony to see what could be done scientifically, and I obtained 79 pounds of nice comb honey in small boxes. The others, to a great extent worked on the let-alone plan, gave me from 5 to 10 pounds of honey, or a fine swarm of bees. I also reared a number of queens. Those colonies that did the best had queens bred from a colony that I procured from Mr. Oatman. The queens are very prolific, and the workers great foragers, being fully up to the reputation given them by Mr. Hedden. I intend to give the Cyprians a thorough test next season. I expect to get 2 Cyprian queens next spring from Mr. Alley. I am highly pleased to have the Bee Journal weekly. Surely you have taken a step that beekeepers may well feel proud of. I cannot understand how anyone can undertake to keep bees without the aid of the Bee Journal. The writings of Mr. G.M. Doolittle in the American Bee Journal for 1880 were of infinitely more value than the year's subscription. In fact, each number is a feast of good things for the apiarist. Leonidas Carson, S., Frederick, Ohio, January 7th, 1881. Sections. Will you please advise me through the Bee Journal what size of sections would be preferable to adopt? I am a new beginner in the bee business, and have not produced any comb honey as yet to speak of. And before making frames, buying sections, etc., I would like the opinion of someone experienced in the business as to whether bees will store as well in the small 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 sections as in larger ones, and also whether honey in the larger sections will bring as good prices as in the small ones. Will bees store as rapidly where separators are used as where they are not? E. Hunt, Sheridan, Michigan. The market shows no preference between 1 and 2 pound boxes, nor do the bees. Opinion is divided regarding separators being a hindrance, on which question we take negative grounds. Ed. End of section 11. Section 12 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Brian Gallegos. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Our Mailbox. Too cold for anything. Bees in good condition. Too cold for anything. The mercury froze up on January 8th and again last night at 10 p.m. and remained frozen until 6 a.m. today. The cold is intense. All business is suspended. The mercury has not been above zero since Christmas. Much suffering prevails. I fear it will kill off most of the bees here. Many are dead now. Mine are still dry and nice, being strong and well packed. The weather since November 1st, 1880, is the severest known to the oldest inhabitant. E. A. Morgan, Arcadia, Wisconsin, January 14th, 1881. Bees in good condition. I had a light yield of honey in the past season, but I doubled up my colonies, and they have plenty of honey to winter on. They are on the summer stands and are, at this writing, in excellent condition. They have not had a flight since the middle of November. The weather has been steady and very cold. I hope you will make a success of the Weekly Bee Journal, for I think that it cannot be published and read too often by the apiarist. Upon the close reading of the good experience of the many, our success greatly depends. William P. Everett, Davis, Michigan. End of Section 12.
Section 13 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. Our Mailbox. Dysentery. Cold. Poor winter for bees. Dysentery. I had 18 colonies last fall, most of them well packed in chaff on their summer stands, and with plenty of sealed honey. But as soon as cold weather set in, they began to come out of their hives and die, till about 1/4 of them are dead, and the rest are in a very bad condition. Some left from 10 to 20 pounds of nice capped honey in the hives. Some of the combs are badly daubed up. Will that honey do to feed other bees in the spring? Or will those daubed combs be injurious to young bees? I think it is dysentery caused by bad honey gathered late in the fall. J. M. Pearson, Troy, Ohio. When the bees can fly in the spring, the honey, even though a little sour, will not injure the bees. The daubed combs will very soon be cleaned up by the bees. Editor. Cold. It is 26 degrees below zero here this morning, but we think it will not disturb our 136 colonies of bees very much. Rust Brothers, Ellicottville, New York, January 12, 1881. Poor winter for bees. The Weekly Bee Journal comes to hand all right. I am well pleased with its contents, and only wish I knew how to get as much information in regard to bee culture with the same money as I expect to receive from the weekly in the next 12 months. The past season here was rather poor for bees, but I think they generally went into winter quarters with enough honey to carry them through. The winter so far has been very severe, and bees that are neglected will be lost. I feel very easy about my bees. I have them packed in chaff on their summer stands. I have wintered them in that way for the past 9 years. John I. Martin, Falls City, Nebraska, January 8, 1881. End of section 13.
Section 14 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Brian Gallegos. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. Our Mailbox, Superiority of Italians, Wants the Weekly, Catnip and Jessamine. Superiority of Italians. Bees done poorly here last season. Many will die this winter for want of stores, though mine have plenty to winter on, except a few black colonies. I took about 700 pounds of comb honey from about 30 colonies, the Italians and hybrids leading the blacks about 75%. Your valuable journal is read with much interest and profit. W.H. Smith, Burlington, Iowa, January 10, 1881. Wants the Weekly. You will have to change my subscription to the weekly journal. I subscribed for the semi-monthly, but I cannot do without the weekly. It has been a good monthly, and I have no fear but it will be just as good a weekly. I wish you success. Big Springs, Michigan, J. Precious. We do so with pleasure, and if there are any others who desire to change to the weekly, we will with pleasure accommodate them. Ed. Catnip and Jessamine. These are excellent honey plants in this locality, much better than others I see noticed in the Bee Journal. Albert E. Foster, Covington, Kentucky. End of section 14.
Section 15 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by David Lawrence in Ottawa, Ontario, July 2025. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. Our Mailbox, Wintering Well, Unprotected, Perishing by the Hundreds. Wintering Well. I am wintering 72 colonies. They are all right now, except one that is wasting away. I think more than 1/2 of the bees in this region are dead now. I must have the Weekly Bee Journal. James Harper, Madison, Michigan, January 12, 1881. Unprotected. I hear that many bees are already dead where they are unprotected. I am well pleased with the Weekly Bee Journal. Now that we are to have its visits weekly, I think everyone should renew their subscriptions promptly and send at least one new subscriber. I will do all I can for it in this region. M. A. Newman, Collins, Illinois, January 13, 1881. Perishing by the hundreds. Bees are not wintering well here. They have been confined so long. They fly out, drop on the snow by the hundreds, and perish. They have had no purifying flight since November 5. They work on various kinds of decaying fruit, and this is the chief cause of the difficulty. Send on the weekly. I cannot afford to lose a single copy. W. D. Fletcher, Lansingtonville, New York. End of section 15. Section 16 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by David Lawrence in Ottawa, Ontario. July 2025. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. Our mailbox. Uses of the Langstroth hive. A good showing. Uses of the Langstroth hive. It has been rather a poor year for honey here in Maine. I had last fall 50 colonies, most of them in Langstroth hives, but some in Root's Simplicity and Chafe hives. I put 23 colonies in cellar. I have had the best success there. I have used Langstroth about 20 years, and I like it the best of any I have used. Take it altogether, although I have had as good success in wintering in the American. I have 27 colonies packed in chaff and straw on summer stands to try it. Lucian French, Dexter, Maine, January 13, 1881. A good showing. In 1879, I started with 1 Italian and 1 hybrid colonies, increased to 6, and wintered in cellar without loss. Next year they increased to 21 by natural swarming, and gave 500 pounds of red clover comb honey, leaving plenty to winter on. Taylor, Wisconsin, J.W. Ellison. End of section 16. Section 17 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. Editorial Comments. The American Bee Journal. Thomas C. Newman, Editor and Proprietor. Chicago, Illinois, January 19, 1881. Dr. N. P. Allen, President of the North American Beekeeper Society, writes, "The Weekly Bee Journal cannot be surpassed in its mechanical appearance, as well as the valuable matter it contains. Every beekeeper ought to subscribe to it." In Great Britain, they have been experiencing the coldest and most severe weather for many past years. It seems that the severity of the weather is general, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. In the autumn, says the London Mark Lane Express, storms, floods, frosts, and unsettled weather over the whole United Kingdom seriously delayed wheat sowing. Notwithstanding the fact that we commenced the year by issuing 10,000 copies of number 1, the call for samples was so great and new subscriptions so numerous that in number 2 we announced that we could not supply any more of the first number. Since that, we have found it absolutely essential to set the type again, and have printed several thousand extra copies in order to supply our new subscribers with that number to complete their files for the year. In addition to the almost unanimous renewal of the subscribers of last year, we have added over 500 new ones during the first half of this month. We knew there was a demand for a weekly bee paper, but had no idea that it was so general and persistent. The Weekly Bee Journal is already established on a firm paying basis, thanks to its friends and patrons. We fully believe in progression, no backward steps, and we shall apply this to the journal as well as to bees. To this end, we now apply ourselves with renewed vigor and hope by next year to surprise our friends with still greater and more substantial improvements. We have accepted an invitation to attend the Ashtabula County, Ohio convention, which is to be held at Andover, Ohio, on Tuesday and Wednesday, February 8 and 9, 1881. On the evening of Tuesday the 8th, we have engaged to deliver a public lecture on bees and honey. There being a large number of beekeepers in that region, we expect the meeting will be very largely attended. All interested will please notice the date, as it has been changed. Mr. William Carr of Newton Heath, England, has issued a pamphlet of 16 pages and cover on the introduction and early history of bees and honey. It is full of interesting matter. We will give copious extracts from it when we can find room in the Weekly Bee Journal. Mr. Carr has our thanks for the compliment of a copy. The Northeast Wisconsin Convention was held yesterday at Oshkosh. We are sorry the notice came too late for last week's journal. End of section 17. Read by David Lawrence in Ottawa, Ontario, July 2025.
Section 18 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Selecting location for an apiary. Last fall, the burden of complaint in many sections was scarcity of honey for bees to winter on, and now some reports from nearly every direction saying a great many bees will perish here this winter. Of course, the latter state of affairs is to a great extent the direct or indirect result of the former, occasioned by the early approach of winter and its long continuation without the usual mild intermission, which rendered feeding impracticable with those who trusted to luck for an opportunity to feed before this time. In many cases, dysentery has developed itself among bees improperly protected, being packed away too warm or not warm enough or without sufficient absorbance, and in some cases with improper food, their long confinement rendering them peculiarly sensitive to defective preparation. As a consequence, many beekeepers will become dissatisfied with their present locations and will turn their attention elsewhere for fairer fields and pastures green, with a view to making beekeeping more reliable and to retrieve losses sustained during the past 2 discouraging seasons. To such persons and those about to embark in beekeeping as a specialty, a few hints regarding the selection of a location for an apiary may not be out of place. Be in no hurry about making your decision, or rather start about it soon enough to allow yourself plenty of time to thoroughly canvass and investigate the different points under consideration. Locate where there is a profusion of white clover, with timber to the west and north, within range where basswood or linden abounds, goldenrod, aster, Spanish needle, and heartsease or smartweed abound in almost every locality, and where they do not, it is easy and profitable to put in a few acres of buckwheat for late fall honey, as there is none better for wintering bees, and extracted buckwheat honey will always find a ready sale. There are undoubtedly many locations in the country yet unoccupied by the apiarist where the above requisites exist, and so far nature has amply provided. Our broken or low country is no particular disparagement, because the less desirable for cultivation, the more encouragement will there be for you to take time by the forelock and plant plentifully of such honey plants as will ensure a constant bloom, and provide against the time when others, encouraged by your success, shall go into beekeeping in your neighborhood and overstock the location unless nature is liberally assisted. With all the above natural advantages secured, aided by your provident forethought in planting, you will have done much to settle the question as to the best method of wintering, and your bees, let them be of whatever color, will solve the problem as to which is the best race. We are often almost persuaded that were more attention devoted to selecting a suitable location and to providing continuous pasturage, there would be less reason for so much talk about procuring the best races of bees. The bees reared 'neath Italia's skies would scarcely repay the expense of importing. No longer would we tread the shining sands of Syria in search of a better type. We could afford to respect the superstitions and avoid the scorching suns of Cyprus, for their bees would gather no more honey than our own. The bees of China would be left undisturbed in the shade of its historic wall, and those in Caucasus would still fly from flower to flower in their own native valleys. What though we possessed a type of bees with the wings of a condor, with tongues as long as that of Xantip, and stomachs with a carrying capacity equal to that of Falstaff? Of what avail are they if there is no honey to gather, no flowers yielding nectar? In locating an apiary, avoid the close proximity of laurel thickets, as honey gathered from the laurel is unwholesome, if not really poisonous. Avoid the neighborhood of cider mills, and do not locate immediately near a large body of water, as it will confine your bee range to one direction exclusively. We would not like to advise the selection of a location already well stocked with bees, as it may be possible to overstock almost any locality unless some means are adopted to render it improbable. Many things are desirable in making a choice, and several positive disadvantages are to be avoided. End of section 18, read by Brize Cries of Ohio.
Section 19 of The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by ShrimpPhish. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19, 1881, by Various. The Beautiful. Questions. The Beautiful. Of all mankind, beekeepers should admire the beautiful, and we really think they do. Our bees, of the Italian, Cyprian, and albino varieties, are beautiful to look upon, and they sip the nectar from the loveliest flowers, hide it in dainty cells of match beauty and virgin whiteness. What is there in all God's creation so soul-inspiring as a cultivated garden of nature's flowers, of variegated hues and heavenly grandeur? None but the unfortunate or despondent can fail to enjoy nature in her garb of beauty, decked by the beauteous hand of deity. To produce a garden of living gorgeousness, we may all aspire and long enjoy its gratifying results. These thoughts were awakened upon opening Vic's Floral Guide, which the morning mail brought to our desk. Of the many seed and plant catalogs produced by seedsmen and nurserymen that are doing so much to inform the people and beautify and enrich our country, none are so beautiful and instructive as Vic's Floral Guide. Its illustrations are handsome and given by the hundred, while its colored plate is a gem. This work, although costing but 10 cents, is handsome enough for a gift book or a place on the parlor table. Published by James Vick, Rochester, New York. Questions. 1. How long can bees be confined to the hive in cold weather without any injurious effects? 2. When giving a matured queen cell to a nucleus that has just started cells of their own, should the cells that are started be cut out? 3. When 2 or more swarms of black bees cluster together, is it best to hive them together or divide them, and how could they be divided so as to get the queens? A. G. Castle. 1. If everything is favorable, feed, temperature, etc., they will stand 4 months' confinement. 2. It is better to remove them, though not necessary. 3. Unless very heavy, hive them together. To find the queens, shake the cluster on a sheet, and while the bees are scattered, the queens can be easily distinguished and secured. Editor. End of section 19.
Section 20 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Our climate has changed. In Land and Water, CMC makes the following remarks upon the changes that have taken and are taking place in the American climate. Since my early youth, this climate has changed. The clearing away of the forests gives unimpeded sweep to northern winds. The leaves do not so long absorb and retain the fallen rains, and the treading of the surface by stalk all make the summer drier. There were then 100 springs, where there is one now. The rills or creeks are gone or soon dry up, and scientific culture has to ward off the effects of drought. If shallow plowing in the first breaking is made, the rush of the surface water more than ever sweeps the soil. What remains is shallow, and the harsh winds and sun penetrate the roots, and the crop is injured. Is it any wonder that our bees cannot gather as much honey as formerly, when the forests are swept away by advancing civilization and the consequent cultivation of the land? This furnishes convincing proof that it now becomes a duty for beekeepers to plant honey producers, in order to furnish bees with the nectar which they may gather. In this way only can we keep bees in the future with pleasure and profit. End of section 20. Read by Anita Hibbard, February 17th, 2025.
Section 21 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Hints to State Vice Presidents as others see us. We respectfully suggest that they communicate with the different official boards of the Agricultural Society in their respect for state, and endeavor to induce them to offer appropriate prizes for bees and honey at the fair for the coming season. The following or something similar to it would be well to recommend in the line of prizes. Best package of honey in the comb, 1 pound or more. Best package of extracted honey, 1 pound or more. Best crate for honey in the comb in the most marketable shape. Best display of honey, both comb and extracted. Best display of beekeeper supplies. Best colony of Italian bees. Best exhibition with a colony of bees in a movable frame hive, including their public manipulation. Best show of beeswax. Best beehive for all purposes. Those who have subscribed for the monthly or semi-monthly and may want to change for the weekly can do so at any time by paying the difference. As others see us, Friend Newman of the Bee Journal, published at Chicago, has made a new step in journalism, which marks also the rapid advance in the bee industry of this country. The Bee Journal, which has for 20 years been published as a monthly, appears with its initial numbers for the new year as an 8-page weekly. We welcome this evidence of the healthy growth of the apiary and enterprise of the veteran editor. The journal stands at the head of bee periodicals of this country, which includes that of the world, for America leads the world in the science and industry of apiculture. The journal is among our most welcome exchanges. Kansas Farmer. End of section 21. Read by Claudia Mitchell.
Section 22 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January the 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Arnav Darnal. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January the 19th, 1881. By Various. The British Bee Journal, Bee Education, Undiscovered Truths, Queen Excluders. British Bee Journal. The editor, Mr. Abbott, speaking of the late large importation of American honey in the comb, and that it produced quite a scare among English apiarists, says, "We must not, however, attempt to deny that the great import of American honey was a surprise, nor that it frightened many. Nor will we pretend that its preparation did not exhibit a superior knowledge of the means of cultivating the bee to that which had been previously shown in this country. But we are glad to say that, instead of producing general or permanent alarm, it acted as a stimulus." Bee Education. On this subject, the editor remarks as follows. The endeavour to establish a professorship under government has, unfortunately, not been quite successful, but great interest has been aroused, and there is reason to hope that, in the ensuing year, the application will be favourably received, when, bee culture becoming a branch of national education, the cobwebs of ignorance and superstition will be swept out of the apiary, and England will cease to be a laughingstock among continental beekeepers. Undiscovered Truths. Comparing all that is known about bees with the yet unknown, Mr. Abbott says, "Turning now to the future, we cannot pretend to unveil what is hidden. We are told by Dr. J.P.H, one of the greatest continental bee masters, that the little we know of bees is but as the sand on the shore in comparison with the treasures of the ocean, and we can scarcely hope that the waves of a year, or even a lifetime, will reveal them. But gradually they will be brought to light. Step by step, one by one, the secrets of nature are unravelled, and the mind of man bounds with delight as the beauty of the glorious fitness of things and the mutuality of their relations are discovered." Queen Excluders. Upon this subject, the editor remarks thus. Zinc with round-holed perforations was first brought into public notice for queen-excluding purposes by Mr. Obed Paul, of Uphill, Weston-super-Mare, in 1875, and a letter of his will be found on page 75 of the British Bee Journal for that year, in which he stated that he had used it for some years. Mr. Paul also said, another good feature in the zinc is, I believe, that it is almost impossible for a bee to get through with a load of pollen. And this fact is an important one as distinguishing the round-holed zinc from the long-holed of later introduction. The zinc used by Mr. Paul had 3 16-inch perforations, but after considerable experience, it was found to be a little too large, and on the recommendation of Mr. Cohen, that having 524 came generally into use. and it was with this kind we uncovered our new idea frame of 1877, a full description of which was given in the journal, page 62 of that year, and which Mr. D.A. Jones of Ontario is now introducing into America. Subsequent to that date, and through correspondence and personal contact with Colonel Pearson of Nancy, France, who will ever be remembered in connection with improved bee culture both there and here, we were made aware that the late Venerable Bay Colin had been for years using sheet iron with oblong holes in it for excluding purposes, and having obtained samples, presently succeeded in obtaining the correct thing in zinc, as it is now largely used in all English apiaries. The round hole perforation admits the body of a worker, but it gives it a scraping squeeze all round, thereby effectually preventing the passage of pollen. The Bay Colin had abandoned the round hole on this very account, and adopted the long but narrower hole through which a bee queen cannot pass her thorax, while a worker can easily pass through with every slight pressure, and with no hindrance to her pollen carrying. End of section 22.
The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by various. Beekeepers Exchange, First Importer, Adulteration, Beekeeper. Beekeepers Exchange. First Importer. Mr. C.J. Robinson says that Mr. J.B. Parson was not the first to import Italians into this country. Mr. Manhan of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania was the first. He had charge of the government and Mr. Parson's bees while on passages across the Atlantic. I mailed the first queen bee that went through the mail. It went to Reverend Longstrauth, who had the Parson stock of bees. Adulteration. On this subject, Mr. Nels, the editor, has the following observations. It is highly important that beekeepers consolidate their efforts against the wholesale adulterations of sweets, which adulterations is very injurious to public health and to the legitimate production of the wholesale sweets. The exchange from its first numbers until now has put forth its effort in the development of the honey market and towards the suppression of the miserable adulterations that are now allowed to boast their ability to deceive the ignorant consuming public. The interest of producers and consumers can thus be promulgated in the same journal, and to this end the exchange will bend its energies in the future. We are glad to find Mr. Nelson on the right side of this question, but would prefer not to see the advertisements for glucose on the cover of the same paper. It is best not to touch or handle the filthy fraud. Beekeeper. As usual, this is tilled with personal abuse. This time it is Professor Cook who has received a good share of attention, but no disclaimer from him is necessary to persuade his acquaintances that he never used the language therein attributed to him. That the writer of the article was so informed we do not doubt, but more is required than the mere assertion or even affidavit of his informant to convince anyone that Professor Cook made use of such expression. The paper is so badly printed as to be a disgrace to the art of printing, and with it persistently repeated slanders and misrepresentation, it is a libel on the journalism of the world. A writer in an exchange thus forcibly expressed his noble thoughts. A noble-minded person will never resent the omission of others or falsely construe their motive. The brave only know how to forgive and, as far as possible, to forget real or imagined injuries. But the coward never forgives. He waits in ambush for an opportunity to strike in the dark or stab in the back. Small minds are hurt by small events, but great minds see through and despise them. True self-respect is always full of respect towards others and waste no thoughts on petty grievances. End of section 23. Read by Claudia Mitchell.
Section 24 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January the 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Arnav Darnal. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January the 19th, 1881, by various. London Journal of Horticulture. The Honey Harvest, Straw Hive Controversy. The Honey Harvest. The accounts which are coming in from various parts of the country giving reports of the honey harvest are various. In some counties, hardly any honey seems to have been taken. The Midland counties seem to have suffered worst in every way, owing to the deluges of rain following upon the constantly recurring thunderstorms of June and July. Of course, this weather must have been as disastrous to bees as to the farmer in respect of his corn and hay crops. The result of the year's beekeeping above given surely teaches the lesson no desperandum, and should encourage all to take the utmost pains and to spare no expense in feeding up their stocks of bees in good time during the warm days and nights of mid-autumn. Instead of all dying during the winter, as they certainly would have done, and left me in beggary as an apiarist, my colonies of bees now numbered 12, all in good health and full of promise, worth at least 30 shillings apiece, in all £18, and the profit of the year £13 additional, so that I am fully £31 better off than I should have been if I had despaired or neglected my bees as did so many of my hapless neighbours. Straw hive controversy. In England, they're having a discussion on the advantages of bar frame hives as compared with the old straw skep. Mr. Pettigrew is the champion of the latter and has thrown out a challenge to the bar frame hivemen to show results. Several of the latter are after him with facts and figures. Mr. William Mann, who has been converted from the straw skep method, remarks as follows. I do not keep a record of every hive, but I did of one this year. It gave me £122 of comb honey in £1 sections, £30 extracted honey, and has over £40 left to winter on. Yet, I consider, this has been a poor honey season. I sold the honey taken from this hive for £9 11 shillings, and have my colony left to me well supplied. Mr. James Anderson of Scotland says, Your correspondent has a good right to praise his own system, but with your permission, I will give one instance that came under my own observation of the benefits of the Stewartson system in Arran this most productive season. From one colony, James Crawford, a mason, obtained the following results. Old colony £140, first swarm £187, second swarm £154, total £481. It seems very strange to us that in this age of enlightenment, anyone, and especially Mr. Pettigrew, could be found to champion that old fogey system of past ages. It is true, with good management and careful study, good results can be obtained from almost any hive in existence, and in this, Mr. P seems to rely for his supposed superiority of the straw hive. He is a careful and enthusiastic beekeeper, and would have good results with any hive. End of section 24.
Section 25 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Kristin Barkhurst. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. By Various. Beekeeper's Instructor, Selling Extracted Honey, Shipping Queens. Beekeeper's Instructor. We are glad to see the improved appearance of the instructor. It makes a very creditable appearance typographically and is full of good matter. Selling extracted honey. J.H. Martin thus describes his new plan for selling small quantities of extracted honey. Provide yourself with a tray or several of them. You can make them of wood, but they are better made of tin. Make the tray 3 inches deep and 2 by 3 feet. Warm up your candied honey so you can mash it into a homogeneous mass and fill your tray. Now have several thin strips of wood or tin 3 inches wide and insert in the honey so as to cut the honey into cubes of 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 and set your tray away in a cool place. It will soon candy solid, and you can then separate your cubes, and you will have just a pound in each cube. In like manner, you can make cubes of honey weighing 3 and 5 pounds. Now place a neatly made glass case in your nearest store and expose this honey for sale. Provide clean paper to wrap the chunks in, or provide small paper pails. Shipping Queens. Mrs. L. Harrison gives her experience as follows. Last season, desiring to ship some queens by mail, we procured Harris's provisional mail and introducing cage. We forwarded a queen in one of these cages to Kansas, and in due time received notice that the queen and her attendants were dead on arrival. We immediately mailed another one in the Harris cage. Before doing so, however, we poured water into the cage until the provision was somewhat moistened, and also put in a sponge saturated with honey. This time the queen made the journey in safety. These cages are well made, and we consider the introducing part alone worth all that we paid for them. We would like to have others tell their experience with provisioned mailing cages without any water or honey. End of section 25.
Section 26 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Brian Gallegos. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Cook's Manual of the Apiary. Cook's Manual of the Apiary. Nature, the most noted scientific journal in the world, is published in London, England. It has a long notice of the above-named work, from which we print the following extracts. Professor Cook's work differs from English works on the subject in its combination of science with utilitarianism, while the amateur, pure and simple, is hardly recognized at all. More than 1/3 of the book is devoted to an account of the natural history of the bee, its place in the animal kingdom, its anatomy, physiology, habits, and economy. Then follows the chapters on beekeeping proper, and the author here addresses himself almost exclusively to those who make beekeeping a business, and we are led to understand how much this branch of industry is advancing in America, where honey is now produced on almost as large a scale as corn. Professor Cook has a chapter on marketing honey, tempting the consumer, and other mercantile details, and throughout the book we find constant indications that beekeeping is looked upon as a business rather than a hobby, and that in all its details, economy of labor and materials must be studied and all processes judged by the test of the maximum of cost. An interesting chapter is devoted to honey plants, the principal species from which the bees obtain their honey in America being figured. The English beekeeper will no doubt obtain many useful hints from this excellent manual of bee culture, as practiced by our ingenious and energetic cousins across the Atlantic. End of section 26.
Section 27 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Jonathan Kirk. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Honey and Its Adulteration, by J.P.H. Brown. Read before the Michigan State Convention. I shall not task your patience by any discussion of the mere physical characteristics of honey. You are all familiar with its history, but with its chemical composition there may be less familiarity. Honey, as secreted by the flowers, and when in its liquid state, has the same chemical formula of elements as fructose, or fruit sugar, an uncrystallizable saccharine substance, abounding in grapes, figs, and other fruit. It also contains some coloring matter, a trace of formic acid, gum, and a little mannite or manna sugar. After honey passes into the candied form and assimilates some of the elements of water, its chemical formula becomes similar to glucose, which is also a saccharine product of fruits. The formula of glucose, as given by Brandon Taylor, very eminent chemical authority, is C12H14O14, which may be read 12 atoms of carbon and 14 atoms each of hydrogen and oxygen.
From the fact that there is similarity in the formula of honey and glucose, it is urged by the advocates of honey adulteration that glucose has substantially the same physical properties as honey and the same degree of wholesomeness as food for the human organism. This is incorrect reasoning. The premises are false. In organic chemistry, there are many substances that possess the same number of atoms of the same elements, and yet their properties are most dissimilar. For instance, the oils of turpentine, lemon, bergamot, clove, and thyme are represented by the same formula, and yet their physical and chemical properties are entirely different. On this subject, Brand and Taylor, the authorities previously referred to, observe, when two compounds can be proved to be formed of the same elements in the same proportions by weight, it would appear to be a reasonable inference that their properties should be identical. But chemistry teaches us that this condition may exist, and yet the substances be wholly different in chemical and physical properties. The fact is, the properties of the substance depend not only on the nature of the elements and the number of atoms of each, but on the mode in which these elements are grouped or arranged. Gum, starch, and sugar are isomeric, or are constituted of a like number of atoms of the same elements, and the difference in their properties can therefore only be ascribed to a difference of arrangement among these atoms. Glucose, instead of being a natural product like honey, distilled in God's own laboratory in the flower, is a vile chemical preparation possessing properties entirely different from honey and ruinous to the health of its consumers. It is usually produced in this country by boiling starch and dilute acids. Sulfuric acid plays the most conspicuous part, but muriatic and nitric acids enter also in its manufacture. A bushel of corn weighing 56 pounds will produce some 30 pounds of glucose, and the profits on a bushel is from 30 to 40 cents. Some glucose factories consume over 6,000 bushels of corn every day. This, at a profit of 35 cents per bushel, would amount in the neighborhood of $1 million profit per annum. It is now used in enormous quantities for the purpose of adulteration and fraud in sugars, syrups, and honey. Fully 1/4 of all the common grades of sugar consists of glucose. This accounts for the fact that the sweetening properties of our present sugars are much inferior to those used before the use of glucose. 2 parts of cane sugar contain as much sweet as 5 parts of glucose. Our present syrups and less genuine plantation are manufactured nearly wholly from glucose. Your honey syrup, your maple drip, and rock candy drip are all glucose frauds. A short time ago I saw a lot of nice glass jars in a large confectionery house in Augusta, Georgia, containing a small piece of comb honey bathed in a clear syrup. On taking one up, I read, "Thurber's Best Honey." A little farther on, I read, "In order to prevent the honey from granulating, it has been saturated with corn syrup." Glucose, corn syrup, the devil, by a mild euphonious name. There is no doubt but this nefarious practice of adulterating the food we eat is daily on the increase. With this adulteration there is the notorious fact that dyspepsia, derangement of the liver, and disease of the kidneys are also increasing among the consumers of the trash that is sold for genuine. If the adulteration of honey is allowed to go on without restriction, it will ultimately destroy the entire honey-producing interests. It is somewhat of a problem. How can this traffic and fraud be restrained? Some advocate missionary work, warn the people against the use of fraudulent food, and point out to them the dire consequences attending its consumption. All this may be very well and do much good. Moral suasion and earnest prayer are powerful, but there are cases where I believe it is necessary to use both prayer and earnest blows in order to make an impression. The love of sordid grain is so dominant that men will adulterate, commit fraud, cheat, and swindle, counterfeit the food we eat, and thereby deal out solid and liquid death to their fellows for dollars and cents. These cases are to be met by statutory laws rigorously enforced. I am satisfied that petitions to the United States Congress will not avail. The work must be done by state legislation. Adulteration is fraud. To sell adulterated food is cheating and swindling. The penalty must be for fraud, cheating, and swindling. New Jersey has some such law. Other states must do likewise. When petitions fail, it must be made a political issue and must be fought at the ballot box. It is to be hoped that your society will take the initiative and set the ball in motion in your state. Augusta, Georgia. End of section 27.
Section 28 of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Kristin Rucker, March 15th, 2025, Westford, Massachusetts. The American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various. Read before the Michigan State Convention. About Poisonous Honey by Professor A.J. Hook. To some of you, it may seem unwise and impolitic to admit that honey is ever anything but nutritious and wholesome. But others, of whom our worthy brother Hedin is chief, think that the whole truth concerning our vocation should be told, even though the bitter is mingled with the sweet. But the facts to which I wish to call attention today are so exceptional that I think no one need fear the revelation. The subject in question may, I think, be considered under two heads. First, honey poisonous because of the individual peculiarity of the eater. In this case, the honey has no markedly deleterious qualities, for all honey affects these individuals alike. Second, honey which has absolutely poisonous quality, so that whoever eats becomes a victim to the noxious elements contained in the honey. I presume that everyone present has known some person who could never eat honey without serious inconvenience. My own father is such a one. Indeed, he is so susceptible that all honey, even in homeopathic quantities, induces severe colic, attended with terrible griping pains. That this effect was due to his individual peculiarities and not to the special honey is evident from the fact that all honey affects him in the same way, and further, honey which would cause him severe distress could be eaten by any of the other members of our family with perfect impunity. That this poisoning should be due to some constitutional idiosyncrasy is not hard to believe, for analogous facts are by no means uncommon. I myself am unable to eat cooked tomatoes without discomfort. Says Charles Dadant, I cannot drink milk without suffering from colic. The following from the American Bee Journal, Volume 2, page 231, is to the point. Quote, everyone is aware that certain persons have peculiarities about themselves which render them very susceptible to morbid impressions from causes which on others have no effect whatever. Physicians tell us that certain persons are very susceptible to the action of all mercurial preparations, 1 or 2 grains of calomel producing severe salivation, while others can take 20 or 30 grains without being in the least salivated. Some persons cannot eat cucumbers, nor sit at the table where they are served. Certain persons are afflicted with nettle rash, urticaria, whenever they eat pork. Some persons are seized with a fit of asthma the moment a particle of the root called picaquanha is brought in contact with their bodies. End quote. At our Michigan Agricultural College, our students have been called to work in a swamp which abounds in poisoned sumac, Rus venenata. Many can handle this terrible shrub without the least inconvenience, while others can hardly come in sight of it without becoming victims to the most intolerable pain and suffering, which sometimes persists for years. We conclude then that such cases of honey poisoning as are now under discussion are due wholly to the individual and not to the honey. Mr. Langstroth, see American Bee Journal, Volume 6, page 221, and Mr. J. M. Marvin in the same journal, Volume 2, page 188, claim that the cause of such colic is bee sting poison, which is ejected from the sting of the bees and lodged in the honey. It seems to me that this view is untenable. 1. All honey contains the liquid secreted by the poison glands. 2. It is generally true that animal venom, like that of poisonous snakes, is harmless if taken into the alimentary canal. It is not probable that bee venom is an exception. The more probable explanation is this, that all or nearly all flower nectar contains some element that acts as a poison when taken into the stomach of certain persons. Whatever this element may be, it seems to be expelled or converted into some harmless compound by heat and by granulation. My father can eat honey that has candied with no difficulty, while the same honey eaten before crystallization caused him great distress. Heating the honey seems to work the same effect. I do not know whether it is necessary to boil the honey or not. If so, the quality of the honey would be injured. Mr. Charles Dadant suggests that anyone can overcome this unwelcome peculiarity by commencing to eat a very small quantity and continually increasing. In this way, the body becomes able to resist all evil effects, and the person may soon safely eat all that he craves. When we see how foolish men become able to take such poisons as tobacco and whiskey ad libitum, if not ad infinitum, we can easily believe that Mr. Dadant is right. I have heard it asserted that fresh milk, if drank immediately after the honey is eaten, is a sure preventative of all attendant ills. Our second point, that some honey is absolutely poisonous, so that all who eat it will suffer, is well established. Xenophon, in his account of the retreat of the 10,000, recounts the fact that the soldiers sucked some honeycombs near Trebizond, where there were a great number of beehives, and in consequence were attacked with vomiting and purging. So many were overcome that the ground was so strewed with their bodies as to resemble a field after a great battle. He states that none were lost, but that those who ate were unconscious for 24 hours and did not regain their strength for 3 or 4 days. Tournefort, when traveling in Asia, investigated this matter and concluded that the honey was gathered from the Rhododendron ponticum, or Azalea pontica. Father Lamberti states that these shrubs are common about Colchis, and that the honey at that place often produces effects similar to those described by Xenophon. Dr. Darwin says that the honey from some plants is poisonous to man. Dr. Barton of Philadelphia, in a paper published in the American Philosophical Transactions, says that in 1790 the honey collected near Philadelphia was fatal to many. Through inquiry instituted by the government, determined that the source of this poisonous nectar was the Kalmia latifolia, or mountain laurel. Bevan records the fact that 2 persons at New York died from the effect of eating honey gathered from the dwarf laurel, Kalmia augustifolia. Dr. Barton states that Kalmia hirsuta, Rhododendron maximum, or great laurel, Azalea nudiflora, Andromeda mariana, and Datura stramonium all produce honey that is poisonous both to dogs and to the human species. The symptoms, as given by Dr. Barton, are dimness of sight, vertigo, delirium, pain in the stomach and bowels, convulsions, profuse perspiration, foaming at the mouth, vomiting, purging, and in some instances temporary paralysis, but very seldom death. Similar cases to those already narrated are detailed in the New Jersey Medical Reporter for November 1852. J. Hammer, M.D., of Halifax Courthouse, Virginia, A physician in the Confederate Army recounts in Gleanings, Volume 3, page 17, his own experience and that of several others, which agree almost entirely with what I have already given from Xenophon and Dr. Barton. He states that the honey was gathered from the mountain laurel, which grew in the Shenandoah Valley, Virginia. About the middle of last October, I received a letter from Mr. C., who lives in a neighboring state, in which it was stated that some honey sent by Mr. C. to some friends in New York City had produced serious sickness. All who ate of it noticed that there was a sharp taste like that of cayenne pepper, and that it produced coughing upon touching the throat. Suspicion being aroused as to its wholesome character, all but two present at the table refused to eat, though two children took 1 or 2 mouthfuls. The two who ate heartily to quote, soon complained of nausea, vomited terribly, while their extremities became cold. They soon were unable to see. The children who tasted but little of the honey were troubled in the same way, but not so badly. A doctor was called at once, who gave an emetic and then whiskey. Soon all were well again. The pulse of the one who was troubled worst was for a time only 38 per minute. The doctor tasted of the honey and was sick all night. I sent to Mr. C. for some of the honey which he kindly sent to me. The comb honey is light colored, while some extracted honey which he sent, which is less poisonous, if at all so, is dark. Mr. C. says that all the honey which creates the smarting sensation in the mouth and induces the coughing was certainly gathered before July 10th. These characteristics are so marked that Mr. C. could, by simply tasting, select the honey that had the deleterious qualities. Mr. C. does not know from what plants the honey was gathered. I find that the honey received from Mr. C. has one other quality not mentioned above. It is bitter, so much so as to be decidedly unpleasant to my taste. I thought to try the effect of heat upon it, and so heated some of it till it boiled. I kept tasting of it during the time of heating, and also tasted of it after it had boiled. I could see no difference in the taste. Even after boiling for some minutes, it still was peppery and bitter. As my good wife objected decidedly to my eating it, I cannot unfortunately state whether the poison properties escaped with the heating or not, but the probabilities, I think, are that they did not. I cannot offer any very practical suggestions, I regret to say, on this subject. It would be interesting for Mr. C. to determine whether any of the species of Kalmia, rhododendron, and azalea mentioned above abound in his locality. Any good botanist of the region could inform him as to this point. The time of their blooming, as they all bloom in June, I think, together with the fact that they exist in a line south of him in the states of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, makes the inquiry all the more desirable. Again, according to nearly all accounts, there is a little adverse testimony, it is true, but it is probably unreliable. This honey is entirely wholesome to the bees. If this be true, the honey may be fed to the bees in spring, and so not be lost. I should not fear to try this experiment of feeding it out, if I had any of this honey, but from its bitter taste I should deem it safer to try it in spring than in winter, though I presume it is a safe food at any season. From the fact that we only hear of this poisonous honey semi-occasionally, even in those regions where these noxious plants exist, is it not more than probable that these plants are not favorites with the bees, and so are not visited by the latter in quest of nectar, except in occasionally dry seasons like the past summer in the eastern and middle states? It is quite possible that these harmful plants have the power to resist drought, like borage and catnip, and so furnish nectar when the bees are unable to get it elsewhere, and we know bees will accept even glucose if they can get nothing else. I have sufficient faith in this hypothesis so that I would encourage any present or future sufferers to try again, in the hope that the long road which never turns was not the one traveled by their experience. I would also urge such persons to ascertain whether the noxious plants named above are in their neighborhoods. Let all who live in the region where these laurels and their allies grow carefully watch them and note whether they are usually frequented by bees and whether they do not secrete nectar in dry seasons when most other plants fail. End of section 28. End of the American Bee Journal, Volume 17, Number 3, January 19th, 1881, by Various.